Hi, welcome to Talking TV on LATimes.com. And last night was the season premiere of the 5th season of The Walking Dead. I'm Patrick Day. This is Times TV critic Mary McNamara and Times reporter Alicia Banks and Walking Dead superfan. And we are discussing the season premiere of The Walking Dead. First impressions, guys. What did you think?
I thought it was great. I was like, I was worried that they were going to hang out in that railroad car for too long, but man, they were out of there like ASAP. And also, it was the return of Carol and Carol's, well, revenge, her good revenge, showing Rick, who I was still mad at when he banished her. I was so mad when he banished her. And she came back and all is well. And just to see her and Daryl hug, oh my God.
Yeah, they're so an awfully forgiving group of people, I will say. Tyrese and Carol got, that was all put behind them. Carol and Rick, everyone seems to be getting along.
Well, there's nothing like almost getting killed by zombies and cannibals, I guess, to sort of put things in perspective.
Right.
And also Carol had the baby, so.
That's exactly. So she
had taken care of baby Judith.
Alicia, what did you think?
It was a solid episode. It moved fast, but I have no complaints about it. I did tear up a little bit when Daryl and Carol were reunited. Mm-hmm. Just the way he put his head in her chest, I was like, oh, so
they
happy.
Love each other.
Exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, there were a lot of surprises, but I think that the one thing I was most surprised about was the fact that we, after having all these characters be apart for so long, that they brought them back together so quickly in the very first episode. Sort of took me by surprise.
Oh, you thought it was going to take longer?
Sure. Well, I'm just used to everything in The Walking Dead sort of taking a little bit of time to get going, but it felt like they were off to a, right out of the box. They were.
Yeah. The entire episode, I was wondering, is Carol going to meet up with them or no? So I was just sitting there, like, biting my fingers, waiting for it to happen.
Right. I should mention that if you have any questions or comments, you should tweet us at hashtag AskLATimes. So we've been away from The Walking Dead for about 6.5 months. That was the last season finale was back in the end of March. Was it the fact that we haven't seen the show for a while that it made it feel like it was much more violent when we came back, or
no, it was much more violent?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of hard, and I think one of the reasons probably, and this is just me guessing, that the episode moved so quickly and got them out of Terminus so fast is that was horrifying. I mean, the idea, that they had come into this place that they thought was safe, and it was being ruled by cannibals who were very methodical in their cannibalism. And so we had that horrific scene where they basically, you could tell they lined up 5 people, 3 of them were ours, and I guess it was 6, because 3 of them were people you'd never met before. And I'm watching
Red
with
shirts.
My son, and he's going, okay, they're dead, because we don't know their names. Mm-hmm. and they're brutally murdered and bled out, and it was just really horrifying. And then when they walk through, when our guys get free and they walk through, and you see the grisly remains of what is basically human abattoirs, how do you say abattoir? And you realize we couldn't really stay here. I mean, viewers couldn't stay here for very long because it's just so god awful. Right. So I think that's why the episode moves so quickly. But yeah, I mean, it was it's human on human violence now, and I think that's where we're going, because the zombies have become, they know how to kill them so well. Right. So it's not as tense. I mean, when you see hordes of zombies coming, people still get nervous. But when you see 2 or 3, oh, they're going to get out of this, no problem.
Although I will say there was a shot where a zombie, it was a shot where a zombie was chewing on a guy's nose.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There was that one, and the woman who was still screaming, and they had to think her neck, her arm, her stomach. Right. I was like, oh, sorry for you, hun.
Yeah. Well, they always, they do want to remind you that the zombies are still a threat. I think is what it is. And then it's and then when Tyrese gets shoved out of the cabin and there's all these zombies, and I was very worried, and I'm thinking, oh my God, we can't kill Tyrese. And my son was like, oh no, he's going to be fine. It was sure enough, armed with only a sharpened stick, he managed to kill 5 zombies. So.
Right. Well, at this point, that's an interesting question, because they've cycled through so many cast members on that show, and so many beloved characters have been killed. The characters that remain, so many of them, Tyrese, Michonne, Daryl, Carol, Rick, are fan favorites that are they limiting themselves? I mean, are they going to have to make some tough choices this season as far as who they
I wouldn't be surprised if they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you can't keep everyone, no matter how beloved they are. But I'm afraid if Daryl gets the axe, don't know how the show will last after
that's
that.
the question. Is there any one character that if they got rid of him, that's
I think
too far for you?
Absolutely.
Daryl.
I think anyone else could possibly go. We can recover. If you get rid of Daryl, you're asking for it.
I think they can't kill Rick. I mean, I guess they could kill Rick in the final season, whenever the final season is. They can't kill Daryl. I don't think they can kill Carl at this point. I think that's too, and and having carted Judith around for this long, I think she's probably safe.
So cute.
But the rest of them, I mean, yeah, it's like Glenn, I don't know. It's like, even Carol, I don't know. It's like, I think that they're going to be a little more careful about who, you can't kill 3 of them because then but I think you need to watch too as new people come in. It's like, okay, they're certainly on the block, they could go, the people that we met just last season,
right. Well,
they're certainly
in the slaughterhouse scene. Well, with the army medic Bob,
right,
Tookie, something like that. He was there, and I was concerned for him. He was just introduced last season,
right. Yeah, so it's it is always it's like musical chairs or something. So somebody will, no doubt, one of the core band will get it in this season. But it's just a question. But I do think that there are 3 or 4 characters that they can't.
Yeah, someone from the core has to go. At least we've lost at least 1, maybe even 2, like each season.
Right.
Somewhat. I mean, there was Shane. Then we had Lori. Then please remind me of blonde hair.
Oh yeah. I can't remember.
Her name's just left my mind.
It's all the one who got, oh my God, Michonne's friend.
Yeah.
I can't remember her name. Isn't that terrible?
Well, we have a question from a reader who says, speaking of people leaving, she wants to know if Carol will leave the group. She was cast out last season, but she came back in the season premiere. So do you think that she will strike out on her own again?
I don't think she will. I think she'll stay. I mean, there may need to be, I think, a talk we may see between her and Rick, because I mean, he banished her and they haven't seen each other since. So they may have to hash out those feelings or whatever she may want to say. But I think she may want to stay. I think at least with this group, because they still have their humanity, at least for now, that there's strength in numbers with them because they all look out for each other.
I mean, one of the themes, and certainly this is where we're going now that we've sort of established, we've gone through the cycle of zombie violence, is like now the storyline is at what is the nature of brutality and what is the line of brutality? When do you lose your humanity and basically become a zombie? I mean, that's sort of like, the little girl last year who Carol had to kill. I mean, that was what she was examining when she said, we're just like them, and then killed her sister to prove it. And that's something that I think that the show has been exploring all along, is that human beings who are brutal and who kill for no reason are just like them. They're just doing it instinctively. They're doing it with no thought to the greater society. And so we've sort of watched Rick and other members of the band try to come to terms with the fact that violence is required to survive in this land now. But at what point do you lose your soul? What point do you become a zombie? And we saw, Rick was the one who was saying, kill them all.
Exactly.
About the cannibals.
And then Glenn had to check him on it.
Exactly. And so now you've seen, because that was Rick and Carol's tension, was that he felt that Carol had gone over to the dark side. And Carol's like, I'm just teaching these kids what they need to know to survive. And I think you see Carol softening maybe a tiny bit. I mean, she's taking care of Judith. She's, which that baby, it's like, it's been like, just like, put the baby down. It's slowing the adults down. It's like, what are we doing with this baby? But why, how is this baby even still alive? And so that has become a symbol of the remaining humanity.
Well, do you think that the show argues that it's like you said, there's a dark side, there's a line that once you cross, you can't come back? Or do you think that it's sort of a two-way door, that characters, depending on the situation and the circumstances, can lose their humanity, but then gain it back?
I feel that's Rick, because we've seen him sometimes fly off the handle. And I know, like last night, if it hadn't been probably for Glenn speaking up, Rick could have probably went on his own and just went across that entire fence and killed everyone. But Glenn had to bring him back, because I feel when you piss off Rick and he wants revenge, I feel like that's when he can cross that line and just do what he wants.
I think that they're just exploring, what it means to be human in a world where humanity has been so redefined.
Right. Well, Rick, another reader from Google wants to know, do you think Rick is more of a leader after Terminus?
Well, yeah. I mean, he went through, the season before last when he was the gentleman farmer. Was that the season before? Which was just crazy. And then he was such a mess last season, and he and Carl had their issues, and we've seen Michonne become like a little more human, and we've learned more about her character. But I think, when he, at the end of last season, where he said, they're messing with the wrong people, basically, you saw that he was accepting himself as a leader. Yeah,
I think the big question is, how will he react to the idea that which they were setting up in the season premiere, that part of this group wants to just go to Washington. They've got this guy with a mullet who claims to have the cure, knows what's going on with the zombies, and some of these people seem bound and determined to go to Washington. Do you think Rick's going to get on board with that? And do you think that it's possible that he could cede some of his leadership powers to Abraham and Eugene?
That's what I'm waiting to see to play out. I don't know if they'll go to Washington with them. They may. I mean, it could be a lot different from what we've been seeing in Georgia for the last few seasons. But I'm interested to see how that plays out when Abraham kind of gets enough and has to go on his own with Rosita and Eugene.
I hope they go to Washington. I always love it when, futuristic, post-apocalyptic, whatever. It's like Logan's Run, when they ended up in Washington. It was all, you get to see the monuments, it's always such a dramatic. At the beginning of Walking Dead, if you remember, I mean, those scenes of Atlanta and the freeways, and we've sort of gotten away from that, and it's shot almost entirely now in the country, and it's very rural and beautiful, and nature and all that stuff. I think it would be fun to go back to a big city, if only visually. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that Rick is going to go to Washington? The march to Washington?
That's a good question. I think that if he does, it will be against his will. And I think that my prediction is there's going to be a sort of a mini coup within the group to sort of take down Rick as a leader. Because I feel that what we've seen coming out of Terminus is that he is slowly losing his touch with humanity. Now, it'll be interesting to see now that he's got his daughter back, because I think he spent the last half of last season thinking that she was dead. Right. So maybe he's going to retain some sort of a family man appeal. But
I just don't know who the leader is, unless it's Carl. I mean, I don't know who the baton passes to. But where do you think they're going? I mean, what would be like the ideal? Where would you go
in the series?
Yeah.
Well, I think that they have to establish some sort of a community. I think that's been the push for the entire series, is they keep trying to find a way to establish some sort of lifestyle, and for whatever reason, each iteration of that there's a problem in that iteration. The prison had its issues with disease and attacks from outside. Right. Terminus obviously had its problems, so it's going to be a continuous search for how do you sustain life and community in this post-apocalyptic world.
They can never settle down.
Right, they can never settle down.
Right. I thought, if they couldn't make it work in the prison, it's like, where could you go?
They are the Walking Dead. They're going to keep walking. They're going to keep moving.
You can't. You got to keep moving.
So, did you think it was too violent? I mean, did you?
Too violent. I don't know. I have a high bar for violence, although I will say that the clinical nature of violence really makes me squirm. So I can see people's necks getting torn out and faces getting eaten off, and I won't flinch. But when I see somebody's throat getting cut, or a baseball bat to the head, and there's some sort of stainless steel contraption in front of them, I have a hard time watching it.
And just did it without flinching. I felt like I was watching horses or cattle just being slaughtered.
Yeah, the systematic extermination is always the worst.
Do we think we're going to see some of those people again? Not the people, obviously, with their throats cut, but some of the people from Terminus.
Garrett? Is it Garrett or Garrett?
Yeah, Garrett.
I mean, we don't know if he's dead. We saw him. I think he did get shot, or he got nicked by a bullet. But he may come back.
I would think we would, because we got the backstory, and in the back, the backstory being, of course, that they were victims themselves, and that they had to make this decision. And so I think that, we may see a couple of them come in and maybe even be transformed, to find a different way, because the point of seeing the backstory was to realize that you know, monsters are not born, they're made,
Right.
kind of thing. Although I guess there were monsters who invaded, you know, previously. There are some born monsters,
Right.
but you know, it's like, but it is, you know, again, it's the real threat, of course, comes from within, that we are the beasts,
Right.
that we are the ones that we have to worry about the most.
Do you guys believe Eugene?
That's a good question. Something in me wants to believe him because I myself as a fan want to know there is some kind of cure, or that not just a cure, but how did this all start? That's the one question I want answered, but I don't know if we ever will. But I somewhat want to believe him, as goofy as he is in cases.
Well, something obviously happened, and they've, you know, because we saw them at the CDC, and remember, what was that, season 2?
Season 1, I think that was the end of
season one. And it's like, so obviously, you know, there were people working on it, because the guy there who then blew up the place had some understanding of what was happening in the human brain that turned people, and he was the one who predicted that it's going to start moving faster, that you don't have to just be bitten, you can die anyway. And so obviously there's some sort of viral, whether it's you know, something that's been created in a lab or something that people were studying. So if that's the case, then there has to be a way to cure it or reverse it or whatever. But his sort of explanation is like, well, we'll just get to the computers and we'll tweak it this way. And you're going, okay, well, is there power?
Yes, kill fire
is
with
there
fire.
Wi-Fi? I mean, it's like, I'm pretty sure we're
makes
going to have to do something a little more basic than that.
Yes.
You know, inoculation, the smallpox inoculation or something.
Yeah, my prediction is that Eugene, that, you know, everyone's got their way of survival, whether it's you know, a machete or a crossbow, and I think Eugene's mode of survival is he's got some information in his head that only he knows,
that's on a
and you have to keep him safe. But I think that at some point very soon, I think we're going to learn that.
But see, that's why I want to go to Washington, because it's like, you always, when you get to the promised land and you realize, oh, it's just some old guy in, you know, an ivy covered or whatever it is, it's like, that's always a really good reveal. And then you get a little piece of information, perhaps more than you had. And so then, because, you know, there's no way to reverse it. I mean, you know, it's like, what was it, 28 days later, their way of solving it was that the zombies starved, remember? And it's like, these zombies are not starving. So it's like, what, I mean, you know, short of, I guess, drenching the entire world in some sort of, you know, flesh-eating something, you're going to have to figure out a way to not create more zombies. That's the only way.
How do you guys feel at the end of watching an episode, or the end of last night's episode? Do you feel exhilarated that, man, that was a great hour of TV, or do you just feel completely exhausted?
I have to say, I felt exhilarated. I think I went through all the motions of just, you know, being anxious, you know, is everyone going to make it out of Terminus, you know, that we've seen from the very beginning, and, you know, we've collected through the seasons. And then, of course, having, you know, my feelings and emotions and wanting to cry a little bit, you know, with Rick being reunited with Judith, the same thing with Carl, and then Daryl and Carol, you know, which I think we've all kind of had a little fandom over to see if they'll ever be together, finally being reunited, especially, you know, with Daryl losing Merle. And, you know, I think Carol was the other person that he had, you know, a strong connection with. And like, you know, you're kind of afraid to get attached to people because you don't know if they're going to survive or not. So I felt that was good for him to have her there.
I think it's very rare that you get to be happy in a Walking Dead episode.
Exactly.
I mean, because it's always something terrible that happens. It's like, it's never anything good. Or if something good happens, you know that right around the bend. But it's like, especially after last season, which sometimes worked really well for me and sometimes didn't, you know, with where they were all separated and they were all having these very intense, moody journeys. And sometimes I was just like going, come on, you know, like, let's get this show back on the road. So I was really happy to see them all together. I was really happy to, you know, be able to be happy about something. And I felt like it was getting back to where it should be, which is, you know, us against the world and exploring different versions of what the world is. So I thought that I was happy that it was back.
Great.
But I do need Michonne to have her sword. I was very concerned that she left without her sword. And I'm just like, I don't feel safe unless Michonne has her sword.
Great. Well, Mary, Alicia, thanks very much. And you can get the rest of our TV coverage at latimes.com/showtracker.